Exploiting the power of the 12 disciples did not just depend on owning a piece of them. It could be harnessed in other ways too. The first Christians realized that a sure way to get your sacred writings noticed was to claim that one of the disciples had written them. When it was being decided which text should be included in the New Testament, having such a big-name author was a huge bonus,
even if he didn't actually write it.
According to tradition, the disciple who wrote the most was John. He is supposed to have authored a gospel, 3 letters, and one of Christianity's most extraordinary texts, the book of Revelation.
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants.
Is there agreement amongst the scholars, amongst church traditions, that John wrote all of those pieces of writing in the New Testament?
Well, the first portrait of this that we have is by a church father by the name of Irenaeus in the 2nd century. And he tells us that there is a John who was the beloved disciple, who wrote the gospel, and he also received the revelation on the island of Patmos. Now, even as early as the 3rd century, there was a Christian by the name of Dionysius who disagreed with this. He saw that there was potentially 2 Johns. And today, biblical scholars, they think there was perhaps even 3 Johns that composed these documents that we have in the New Testament.
Many biblical scholars now believe that the books in the Bible traditionally attributed to John were actually written by 3 men: John the Evangelist, John the Presbyter, and John of Patmos, and that the disciple John might not have been any of them.
Apostles' names get linked to Gospels and sacred writings because it's like the authority of cities. You need a big name attached to a Gospel or to a letter. So this is one of the key processes for the New Testament canonization, linking a letter or a Gospel or whatever with a big name.
For some of the early Christians, it didn't matter if John had actually written all those books. What mattered was his name and the power and status it gave them as a brand. And the fact that when it was being decided which sacred text would be included in the New Testament, theirs would be top of the list. One of the books attributed to John is the New Testament's strangest text, full of violent and disturbing language, and one that has been used by some of the more extreme Christian fundamentalists to prophesy the end of the world.
And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a great voice, If any man worshippeth the beast and his image, and receiveth a mark on his forehead, or upon his hand, he also shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God.
The Greek island of Patmos lies in the middle of the Aegean. Today, it is home to a Greek Orthodox monastery, but 2,000 years ago, it was a Roman penal colony. According to tradition, because of his preaching, the disciple John was exiled here by the Romans. It was here, in a cave, that he was supposed to have had a miraculous vision that became the book of Revelation.
Το μέλλον της ανθρωπότητος. Βέβαια, εμείς δεν θέλουμε...
The fathers of the Eastern Church were always wary about the interpretation of this book, and the Church took care, one could say, to keep this book hidden away, not to use it too much. Of course, in the West, there have been lots of interpretations, some of which are extreme.
Like many people, I find the book is full of disturbing images and written in a code that's hard to understand.
Here is wisdom. He that hath understanding, let him count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. 666.
Now, in the ancient world with languages like Greek and Hebrew, letters represented. So most scholars today believe that 666 represents in Hebrew Neron Kaiser or Caesar Nero. And so this fits very well with the whole historical background of Revelation, with the suicide of Nero in AD 66 leading up then to this Year of the Four Emperors.
Some scholars now believe the coded language in the book of Revelation was designed to disguise the real purpose of its author, an attack on the Roman Empire.
There's the beast out of the sea, and most scholars would interpret that beast in this way. Directly to the west is the Aegean Sea, and every year the Roman governor coming from Rome would come to the province of Asia by ship to be that representative of the emperor. He's that figurehead, that beast out of the sea.
For most historians, the book of Revelation is referring to a particular moment in time and a particular audience who understood its code. But today, some Christian fundamentalists believe it contains another message, one that can be used to prophesy the end of the world.
Was that they believe very strongly that they were playing a very important role in the unfolding of biblical events in our time. That these events in Waco were prophesied in the book of Revelation, and that if they were to surrender to the FBI, they would lose their souls. They truly believe.
His most beloved disciple on Patmos, on the day of the Lord, was in the Spirit, and the Lord says, I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this world. It will go through all of trials and tribulations, but the center part, and you can read it in Revelation, will be Jerusalem. The two witnesses.
Millions of Christian Zionists, like Jan William van der Hoven, believe the book of Revelation prophesies that a final battle between good and evil will be fought in Jerusalem.
You can see how true the Revelation is, because it says there will be two witnesses or prophets like Elijah and Moses in that kind of power. And they will prophesy judgments on the people who in their homosexual, decadent, self-serving, animalistic ways of life that the world more and more chooses. We have to serve what is in us, our pleasure. So if you serve the beast, the animal inside yourself, long enough, you won't mind it when the beast is being put by the devil and says, now you serve him, you worship him outside yourself.
Christian Zionists believe that before Jesus can return to earth, Jews have to return to the homeland, Israel must be permitted to continue its occupation of Palestinian lands, and a new Jewish temple must be built in the center of Jerusalem.
But if the temple has to be rebuilt for the Messiah to return, according to Revelation, what you're telling me about Revelation, what's going to happen to the mosques up there? What's going to happen to Muslims in Jerusalem if the temple has to be rebuilt? How does that work?
I don't want to be wiser than God. They have built their mosques on the places where the Jewish temple stood, and deny now that there was a Jewish temple.
Whoever the person was who wrote the book of Revelation, most scholars think it certainly wasn't John the disciple, but his name has been used to authenticate one of the most controversial and dangerous books of the Bible. And the consequences are with us today, as millions of Christian Zionists use it to justify their support of Israel's continuing occupation of Palestinian lands.
Is bringing Jews back then part of helping to fulfill the revelation?
Absolutely.
It's part of fulfilling
I was yesterday with a Dutchman, and he says there are people now going all over the world, to the Jews in Argentina, in Brazil.
And bring them back?
Yes, yes.
But if they all come back, what's going to happen to the Palestinians who are here? How does that get played out in Revelation?
The Arabs have more than 21 nations.
So they can go elsewhere?
I would say to the Arabs, if you want to be an Israeli Arab, you're welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan. But if you don't want to be an Israeli, you have 21 nations to choose from.
So they can go elsewhere?
Yes.
I think we can clearly say that Revelation is the most abused book in the Bible. Even through the history of the canon for 2,000 years, it's been subject to abuse.
God does not want to frighten mankind. God, the Church, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Gospel, our traditions of the Eastern Church, none of them want to scare mankind.